Hey, Carlos Lago and Alistair Weaver here with Edmunds, and we finally have a set of wheels for our fan favorite, Sir Baron von Bronco. Alistair.
Thank you, sir. That's right. At long last, we have the much delayed Ford Bronco and the Land Rover Defender, two iconic names from the world of off-roading, and at long last, we're going to compare them.
Not only that, but we've actually had these two-door SUVs configured in ways that makes them really comparable. So we get to find out how they perform off-road, what they're like to drive, and ultimately, which one you should buy.
But before we get into all of that, be sure to like and subscribe and click that little bell thing. And if you're looking to sell your car and buy one of these in a hot market, go to edmunds.com/sellmycar and we'll make you a cash offer. Now, let's get on with it.
If you're wondering where the Wrangler is, get in line. Last year, we compared the then new Defender against the Toyota 4Runner and Jeep Wrangler. But the biggest problem with that comparison was the Bronco-sized hole in the lineup. Now we can address that question. Which of these two is better overall? Now you can get the Bronco with a locking front differential and 35-inch tall tires. Never mind, they're actually 34.4 inches, but I digress. And that all comes in the Sasquatch off-road package. That package is overkill for this comparison, so we decided to get the Outer Banks. Now this is the more on-road focused Bronco. In fact, it's the only Bronco that comes with 18-inch wheels, and that's the largest wheel you can get on a Bronco. And it's so fancy, it even has painted wheel arches.
Luxury.
Very. This Bronco has also been equipped with the Turbo V6 and 10-speed automatic. It has a locking rear differential and 32-inch tall tires.
You done?
Are you?
I am.
Okay.
My Instagram is updated. Shall we continue the shoot? Prefer Instagram, not good with words. Anyway, this is the Defender 91st edition, and like the Ford, it also has a turbocharged 6-cylinder engine, but it only has an 8-speed gearbox, not a 10. Having said that, it does have more power, up to 80 horsepower more than the Ford, depending on what fuel you put into it. That's 395 ponies. The model we have here has 20-inch wheel rims, but it doesn't have the optional locking rear differential. It does, though, have chunky all-terrain tyres that even say Adventure on them, and it has a locking centre differential that equally distributes the power front to rear and helps you in the rough stuff. Let's talk pricing. At $66,500, it's about $15,000 more than this Bronco, and trim for trim, the Land Rover is always a few $1,000s more than the Ford, so it starts on the back foot despite that power advantage.
Hey, welcome to the interior of the Bronco. Now, when you hop in here, it's immediately obvious that this vehicle costs less than the Defender. You know it just by touching and feeling a lot of the hard plastic around the dash. That's one of the reasons why this vehicle costs a lot less. Now, on the other hand, you can take the roof off and you can take the doors off, and there's no other SUV out there except for the Jeep Wrangler that allows you to do that. So there's certainly a lot more fun to be had in this interior setup. I'm no design expert though. I don't know if this blue matches this brown. Probably wouldn't be the way that I'd order my Bronco, but hey, I didn't order this one, so don't blame me. Now, this Outer Banks has also been equipped with the larger of the available infotainment screens. This screen looks really nice, it's super responsive, and all the physical controls beneath it are large and easy to read, and they're actual buttons that you can touch with your finger, and that makes them easy to use, especially some of these bigger, larger ones that would be easy to manipulate when you have gloves on. The last thing, and it's a really small complaint, is this gauge cluster. I like the fact that there's a big digital display. That's really nice, but I wish there was an analog tachometer instead of an analog speedometer, because I want to reference the tach more quickly instead of the speed, and I already have a digital speedo, so why have it twice? Either way though, this is a functional interior that you could have a lot of fun experiencing. The big downside of the Bronco's back seat isn't the space. The space is actually pretty accommodating if you're an average size adult like myself. The biggest disappointment is the lack of rear vents. That's unfortunate. But the Bronco's advantage over the Defender has to do with how these rear seats fold. It's very simple. That's much nicer than what happens in the Defender. And also the way this is configured gives you more options depending on how many people you want to sit back here. If you've got 3 occupants and a bunch of cargo, you can still make this work, which you can't do in the Defender as easily.
The Defender might be the alpha male of the Land Rover range, but inside it definitely feels more metropolitan than the Bronco, more wine bar than dive bar. You get the feeling that it's really above the Ford's frivolity. The doors don't come off, I mean, how unseemly. And you open the roof with a button, not a bunch of clips. But, and maybe this says something about me, I like it. It is more expensive, but it feels more expensive. The materials are a higher quality. This command screen is more sophisticated. And, pretentious point, the fonts don't look like a child of the 1980s. You also get this so-called jump seat, which means that you can sit 3 abreast in the front. Now, that sounds great on paper, but in reality, anybody sitting there is just going to get jabbed in the ribs by my elbows. Honestly, there's not even room for a flight attendant. Much better just to fold it down and use it as an armrest. Getting into the back requires plenty of dexterity and no little patience. This seat is electric, and as you can see, it's pitifully slow. Glad there's no fire. Still with me? And then you sort of scramble in. It's a good test for the thighs. Once you've finally made it back here, there's actually plenty of room. This front seat's set up for Carlos as a control, and there's a lot more room than you find in the Bronco. Plenty of leg and headspace. But there is a trade-off. The Defender 90's trunk space is actually pretty pitiful if the rear seats are up. There's about 7 cubic feet less than you'd find in the Bronco.
Hey, elephant in the room alert. We're kind of in a pickle about how we talk about the Ford Bronco as it relates to build quality because Ford is having a lot of trouble actually building them. The main issue right now has to do with the hardtop roof, and it's to the point that Ford is actually going to replace the hardtop roof on all Broncos, even if you've already taken delivery of it.
Now, Edmunds actually ordered a Bronco kind of over a year ago with a view that it would be delivered in December 2020. Then it got delayed by the pandemic, then it got delayed by the chip shortages, then with the 2.7 litre engine, which they couldn't build, but they could the 2.3. Then the roof, I think we changed the roof 3 times, I can't even remember what roof we're getting. But finally, it's gonna be built in November for delivery in December, exactly 1 year late.
We say all this because if you're considering putting an order in on a Bronco that has a hardtop, we suggest that you wait until Ford has solved this issue, if they even let you put the order in the first place. But Ford isn't alone. Let's talk about the Defender.
Which has been a paragon of reliability.
That's not true in the slightest.
We do know that there's issues with the touchscreen infotainment system, and with this Defender, they have to get it right, Carlos.
Yes, and with that in mind, let's go into the desert and do some off-roading.
Well, there's no cell phone coverage.
Yes. Did I make it? Well, now, longtime viewers will surely be familiar with our famous industry standard ziggurat of integrity test. As you can tell, this is not our normal ziggurat because the park that we do that at is closed due to fire hazards. Beside the point, the purpose of this test is not to replicate a laboratory articulation test. That's a process that involves specific measurements and math, which I'm not very great at. What we want to do here is climb an off-road SUV up an incline that you might find when you're out adventuring. So in this case, we've found this sort of rock wall. What we want to do here is see what happens when you try to climb up the hill as far as you can. How much does this tire come off the ground? How far can you drive up? And so on and so forth. In this case, the rear tire of the Broncos come up by about an Arnie and a half worth of iPhone 11 Pro, which doesn't mean anything until we get the Defender up here. I'll call out though that the Bronco is available with a disconnecting anti-roll bar on the Badlands trim level. And what that is an anti-roll bar, to back up a little bit, is a bar that mechanically connects the left and right wheels, traditionally front and rear on any given vehicle. What the disconnecting anti-roll bar does is mechanically disconnects that bar from the front wheels, and that can give the Bronco more articulation, presumably allowing that tire to remain on the ground on inclines like this to make sure it can keep delivering traction to help you drive over these kind of inclines. Doesn't really matter here because this Bronco doesn't have that feature. And next we're gonna get the Defender up here to see how far it can go up and how much tire it picks up off the ground. If I can climb back in now. Cool, you're good.
A little bit of throttle, sir. A little bit of throttle.
I'll holler if you go off the edge.
Okay, good. Gentle throttle control. Stop.
So that's pretty impressive because you're basically at the same level as the Bronco. So we measured Bronco right here and your center line's about the same.
Okay.
And so we're basically almost at a ramp. So you're able to climb to the same height. So that's great. You're 4-low, center diff locked?
We're 4-low, center diff lock in rock crawl mode.
Yeah.
With obviously the air suspension, which is a big difference on this car, lifted up, which also looks kind of cool.
So I came up with the rear diff locked in 4-low. So I never decided to challenge the diff, but I need to measure how many Arnies are underneath that tire. For dramatic pause, I've left my phone in the Bronco.
Splendid. I shall wait with bated breath.
Maybe an Arnie and a half, maybe a little bit more than the Bronco, but for a Defender, that's pretty strong versus the Bronco. It's pretty good performance.
Yeah, I mean, every time we've tested this, it's been good off-road though.
For sure. But yeah, that's a great performance from both of these, starting out essentially equal from this highly scientific test.
Do you know what though? You know we normally call this at the other place the ziggurat of integrity. Do you know what this is?
What is this?
The ziggurat of integrity.
Among the Bronco's many off-road tech features is my personal favorite, the Trail Turn Assist. Now what it does is selectively applies brakes to the inside rear tire while you're turning off-road to help tighten that turn. But better than explaining it is actually seeing it in action. So Alistair?
I've actually been wanting to try this feature since the Bronco was announced. It's almost like a modern interpretation of a kind of high school e-brake or handbrake.
The sideways lever.
The bit that you could never get right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give it a whirl. Into drive. Here we go. And as you can see, that's so cool. I'm sorry, that is so cool.
Isn't that great? Yeah, because it just anchors that tire and that becomes your point that you pivot around.
And presumably, if you didn't care about your tires, it'd still work on tarmac.
If you wanted to flat spot your tires, yes. But it basically means you never have to 3-point turn off-road.
That's very cool.
That's
I need another go.
You do this all day, right?
Yeah. Do it till the tire blows.
Don't go. Oh no!
Oh, poor Baron.
No!
Oh, he's okay. He's okay.
When driving the Bronco off-road, there are a number of things that'll be familiar to off-road aficionados and a number of tools that will be great use to off-road rookies. Now, because we have the V6, we have actually more drivetrain configuration options. When you hop in this thing, you will see drive modes like you would expect from a four-wheel drive. You have 2 high, you have 4 high, you have 4 low to access low range, much like you would expect. But this also has a 4 auto, which is kind of like an all-wheel drive or full-time four-wheel drive mode, and that's only available with this V6. That's a lot of buttons to hit down here if you don't know what you're doing. If you do know what you're doing, you know exactly what to do. But what happens if you don't? Well, for that reason, Ford has a number of drive modes. They call them GOAT modes, and that stands for goes over any terrain, which is cute, very cute. But you turn that dial to select the terrain that you're on, like mud or sand, and in some Broncos, like rock crawling and so on. And by turning into those modes, the Bronco will automatically activate the drive setting that you should be in, and it will actually activate the diff locks, whether you have the optional front and the rear, to make sure that you're suited to tackle the terrain that you're driving on. It's beneficial because if you're a rookie, you can just turn the dial to the terrain that you plan on heading on, and the Bronco sorts out the right mode, even going into 4 low should it be appropriate. If you do know what you're doing, you can just forget all that and put the settings, activate the settings that you want to have when you're driving in a particular environment that you're driving in. That's great. I also like the fact that when you hit the switches to activate drive modes in this, whether it's the rear diff lock, whether it's the trail turn assist, whether it's 4 auto or 4 high, there's no delay. You don't have to wait for the computers to figure everything out. They just start changing, they just start adapting. In fact, the diff lock in here is so quick when it turns on, it's kind of, I almost kind of don't suspect it. You hit the button, the light comes on, and that's it. There's no waiting. That's really nice. The rest of the Bronco is super, super smart and super well done. I also like the Bronco overall a whole lot. This is smart because it delivers a ton of off-road capability for those who really want it, but it also doesn't have the sacrifices that come with other super off-road capable vehicles, like, I don't know, the Jeep Wrangler. I know that we're not comparing the Wrangler here, but I can't help but think about the Wrangler in relation to the Bronco and the Defender, because this kind of bridges the gap between the two. It has some of the on-road refinement that you would expect to find from the Defender, and none of the compromises from the Wrangler. Really, really good stuff.
Like the Bronco, the Defender can be tuned to meet your off-road aspirations. This vehicle actually has less off-road hardware than the 4-door we tested last year, but then all things are relative. You still get air suspension, which certainly helps with the ground clearance. There's a low ratio gearbox and an iteration of Land Rover's terrain response system. By using a little button on here, you can actually tell the car what kind of terrain you're on, so mud and ruts, sand, wading, that sort of thing. And that impacts things like the throttle response and stability control to help you through the given terrain, and it certainly helps. It makes off-roading that much easier. There's also a plethora of cameras, so it takes the guesswork out of the terrain in front of your nose. The only thing that I do miss on this particular vehicle is paddle controls for the gearbox, particularly on steep descents. I like that extra level of control from the engine braking. But alongside all the off-road chops, Land Rover's also worked really, really hard to improve the Defender's on-road credentials. I did literally thousands of miles in the original Defender and everyone was painful. This is very different. Even compared to a modern car like the Bronco, the steering is much more precise, the ride quality is much better, and it is so much more refined. The journey to location this morning was about 2.5 hours long, and there's no question that I was happier in the Defender than I would have been in the Ford.
Welcome high up to our Hillside hairpin test. Semi-official, not official at all test. We found an obstacle here on this trail that has a big dip right here that we're gonna put these vehicles through in the worst possible line to see how their clearances stack up when against each other. Stage 2 of the obstacle is the titular hairpin around the bend here. It's a very tight uphill corner that ends into a narrowing passage. And the trick there is to determine basically, can the vehicle make it through? How easily can the vehicle make it through? And what tools does the vehicle have to make it through these obstacles? Alistair's up first with the Defender. Bring it on through.
Okay, just to talk you through what I've done, we're into rock crawl mode, low ratio, obviously. That's locked the center differential, which basically manages so you have equal power going to the front and rear axle. We're now taking it pretty steady. We're in drive. It's a kind of nice Sunday afternoon drive, beautiful view.
Defender's now approaching the hairiest part of the hairpin. Good day, sir.
Good day to you, sir.
Beautiful day, hot day. So, he's picked up the front driver wheel, about an Arnie, I'd say, off the ground. Now about 2 Arnies.
Is that the 6-foot Arnie?
Reel's about squashed, but what's nice is you see back here, he's still got plenty of clearance for the
dramatic effect.
Pause for dramatic effect. I'm trying to explain to the viewers what the vehicle's doing. So it's gonna be tricky right here when he drops down, is avoiding scraping this bumper as he keeps going. Let's see if that can happen. Are you in 4 low or 4 high?
I'm in 4 high, all the systems off, just relying on my talent.
Yeah, as always, as per usual. So your front driver tire's off the ground, and you're gonna avoid scraping here. Close. Those sidewalls are pretty slim.
Yeah, but they look cool. What is nice is the throttle control. You've got a very long throttle at the moment, so I'm able to modulate it very, very easily and very carefully.
Remember, there's a massive cliff over here.
It's pretty impressive. I mean, I know you think this car isn't kind of like macho and alpha enough for you, and I agree that in Birmingham, the UK, this car looks really alpha. Birmingham, Alabama, less so. But as you can see, it's actually very good at doing what it does.
It's getting through a lot without having a locking rear diff. That's fairly impressive, and 20s. But let's see how it does the hairpin here. So the tricky part about this part of the test is this is pretty straight, sheer edge right here. So he's got to come around wide, but also avoid the rocks over here from scraping those beautiful 20-inch wheels that of course you want on your off-roader. Bring it on through.
Take a slightly wider
Also,
line.
this might be a 3-point turn. Climbing it with no issue, but a little wide it looks like.
That might be the driver. I'm now.
Oh! So what's happening is your tire, you've got kind of a step that your rear tire's on, and what happened right there is that the tire's compressing on the rock, and it's acting as a brake and sort of pivoting the car.
I could feel that.
Yeah, around. But man, you don't have a lot of sidewall. It's giving me the heebie-jeebies.
All I can see is like a finger. I'm actually driving more on the cameras and on the screen than on what I can see out the windscreen.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
So he'll climb that. Okay, he's up the shelf. And then how much space he has on that driver's side. So because we've gone a bit wide, we're gonna 3-point turn this.
I think that's my fault though. I tried to open the corner up.
Yeah, now you can straighten out. Now you should be okay. Let's keep moving forward. You're good to go. You're straight all the way through. Maybe right a little bit. Yeah, you're good. It's fun seeing that tire just lock. So it's cool seeing that tire lock. This doesn't have a rear diff, so it is doing a little bit of brake application to try to manage that traction a little bit. So that's neat. That's neat to see.
What's also impressive is it is kind of like a one pedal car, because now even if I'm off the brakes, it effectively uses the engine braking. I think it's applying a bit of ABS as well, just to manage the speed downhill.
Yeah, your crawl ratio is a little bit, like a touch higher than that Bronco, so you'd have the gearing advantage to help slow you down. When you were going downhill, this wheel was coming off the ground and it was stopped, so it was not receiving, whether they were applying brakes to kind of simulate having that diff could be helping give you that traction. But that's pretty impressive.
Because you can get a Defender with a locking rear diff. It's just that this very car doesn't have it.
But it's getting through a lot without it. That's really impressive.
But what I like as well is how maneuverable and how controllable it is, both in terms of, for something with like 400 horsepower nearly, with throttle input is really easy, braking input's really easy, particularly when you go into things like rock crawl. It does what it says on the tin, right?
Yeah.
It's good.
So Alistair did this in 4 low. I'm gonna try to do it in 4 high because it's a Bronco, and damn it, you should be able to do this. Because this is really just a test of articulation and clearance.
And in he goes.
So, traction.
He hasn't got air suspension, of course. This is just a passive setup. Similar front and rear overhangs. Does look quite cool. You're lifting a front left tyre now. Ooh, he's lost a bit of traction.
Get some wheel out of it.
He's got a bit of, here we go.
You know what?
Still fighting for traction.
I'm gonna turn on my 1-pedal drive. I'm trying to do this in 4 high.
Yeah.
Because I feel like a Bronco should be able to do this in 4 high.
Because you can.
Yeah. I will not be a slave to limitations of the earth, I guess. I don't know.
There you go.
All right, I'm gonna try to maneuver around the hairpin now, the hairy hairpin.
The hairy hairpin. Are you using your, what's it called?
So right now I'm using 1-pedal drive to give me some smoothness, but I think I'm gonna use the trail turn assist to make this turn a bit more smoothly.
So this will be the big test of his fancy turning trail thing. You can see it's already starting to lock the rear tire, but it does. So it's actually effectively dragging its way around the corner, pivoting on the left rear tire and dragging its way around.
Turning off trail turn, now I got the diff locked because I got the position I want. Now
So you've got the rear diff locked.
I've got the rear
and
diff.
The center. No, this doesn't have a center.
This doesn't have a center. It's four-wheel drive, yeah.
The other thing you've got, which I know these aren't on every Bronco, your side steps are pretty vulnerable.
Yeah, it's that Outer Banks, this being the most on-road one, it's gonna have those hanging low.
It's like a good challenge. I have my 21-inch rims or 20-inch rims.
I've got the side steps.
You have your side steps. Can't make it too easy.
Side steps are more sacrificial, I think.
20-inch rims look cooler.
This is true.
What's good is both these vehicles are really controllable with all the trick electronics, the way they adjust the throttle now. You can really inch them forwards in a way that, 10, 20 years ago would have been unthinkable.
Oh, I'm gonna keep turning, and we're through.
Straight out, you're good.
Straighten out, and one pedal drive is off, and that's that.
Boom, easy. On with the next. You got anything more aggressive, Mr. Producer?
Away from the rough stuff, you might expect the Defender's road-focused setup and extra power to win the day, but it's closer than you might think. At our test track, the Land Rover recorded 0 to 60 in 6.2 seconds, just half a second faster than the Ford. It's the same gap at the quarter mile. And that's because the Brit is a bit of a fat boy. On our scales, the Defender was an astonishing 553 pounds heavier than the Bronco. That's like carrying around Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder and their gym kit all the time. Not surprisingly, this also has an impact on fuel consumption.
Now it's time for everybody's favorite topic, fuel economy.
And the reality is they're both abysmal.
Yes.
These are big, heavy off-roaders, and pretty much whatever you do, however you drive them, you can't beat the teens.
Goes for real life too, kids. Enjoy it while it lasts. Let's though talk about how these two drive on road. Starting with the Defender specifically, it's a costlier vehicle compared to the Bronco, but that difference shows up as soon as you hop in the cabin and as soon as you drive down the road.
This really is the only vehicle here that you'd really want a road trip. It's more like an SUV with epic off-road chops than a sort of true off-roader of the old school.
And while we're talking about off-road capability, the Defender continually impresses me with what it can do on the trail. Because when you look at the specs, it doesn't quite measure up to the Bronco, but I think that may have to do with my perception of how the Defender looks. It just is kind of soft.
It is kind of soft, particularly when you park it next to the new Bronco. You know, it's strange, I was driving up here this morning thinking about this. I owned an original Defender. My dad had an early Land Rover before they even called Defender. And you know what? I think that the Bronco is actually the real successor to the original Defender. It's cool, it's utilitarian, it's massively capable off-road, and yet today it's full of modern accoutrements. So the real new Defender is not the Defender, it's actually the Bronco.
The Bronco's fun too. It's got a sense of charm and character that makes it really fun to drive. I think the Defender's the one to get if you want that luxurious-like experience with some off-road capability, with surprising off-road capability, but for me, the Bronco's the one to get.
I think Ford's done an amazing job with this vehicle. Above all else, it's just got this incredible sense of fun.
An incredible sense of fun.
Fun.
Hey, if you enjoyed watching this video, let us know in the comments below. And if you didn't, tell us why. Like, comment, and subscribe, and check out edmunds.com/sellmycar to get an instant cash offer on the car you want to sell.
And go easy on the xenophobia.